Welcome to more Deep Thoughts Deep Within the Woods. Hi, I'm Katie, a trained hypnotist, subconscious guide, and meditative state enthusiast. And I wanted to talk about some signs that you may need to work with your subconscious mind. A big one is if you don't like silence and being alone with your thoughts is uncomfortable. And you might say you can't meditate, not because you can't focus, but because it makes you feel uncomfortable. Now, I am not a mental health professional, so please, by all means, before you practice any meditative or subconscious work, get it cleared by a mental health professional. However, I do think that a lot of times when dealing with the subconscious mind and shadow work, people find it very difficult and uncomfortable, more so when they have a lack of self-love and self-understanding and self-space, when they feel that their uncomfortable thoughts, that their flaws, that their cringy behavior says something about their value as a person, rather than it is part of the human experience, it is part of a learning and growing. If one can get into a frame of mind where they can separate ego, which is not overconfidence, it's a protection method, from their own truth and what is best for them, then dealing with these things becomes a lot easier. It's not easier, but it's not impossible. If you can recognize that having uncomfortable thoughts, having cringy behavior, not being perfect, so to speak, does not say anything about you, and in fact, it makes you more human, then it is easier to go into those uncomfortable, shadowy parts of your mind, because you know that no matter what, you are still a good person, you are still worthy, you are still living your life, and your life will be okay, and your life, in fact, will be better for it. I actually find that people who have a hard time talking about or owning up to their uncomfortable thoughts have more, I don't want to say weakness, but because there's this idea that if somebody is okay with talking about their uncomfortable thoughts, the difficult parts of their life, the difficult things that go on in their mind, and I'm not talking about trauma dumping, I'm just talking about being honest when necessary about where you're at. If somebody has a difficult time with this, they often portray it as people who don't have a difficult time with this, have something wrong with them, are crazy, are unhinged. However, I find that those people actually have a lot more limitations in their life and a lot more challenges to overcome because they're not willing to overcome the challenges, because they cannot emotionally handle overcoming the challenges. And the reason that they cannot emotionally handle overcoming these challenges is because they think that having these challenges means something about their value, about their worth. It inherently places a character mark on them to have challenges. This could not be further from the truth. Everybody has challenges. Some people are willing to deal with them. Some people are not. And there's nothing wrong with the people who are not. But I think that the reason that they are not willing to be honest about them and deal with them is because they feel it means something bad about themselves. Obviously, it does not mean something bad about yourself. And this is something that will continue to go on because it is deeply ingrained into all of our subconsciouses that we have to be perfect. And it is not true. I still have to remind myself all the time, and I am constantly looking within, that making a mistake, that having a effed up thought, that having some sort of emotional outburst or cringy behavior, and I'm not talking about extremes here, I'm just talking about everyday conflict and things of that nature. I still have to remind myself that those things are part of life, part of learning, part of growing. Every single person deals with them, whether they admit it or not, and it is okay, and it does not mean anything about me as a person. I have to constantly remind myself that, but when you can embody that, whether you have to remind yourself or not, you are then more able to go within and deal with your deep, dark, uncomfortable thoughts. And I think that this is a very important thing for everybody to learn how to do, because I personally don't believe that conflict happens because one person is fully in the wrong. And I, again, am not talking about somebody purposely, intentionally overstepping boundaries or overstepping somebody's personal autonomy. I am not talking about that. I'm talking about normal, everyday disagreements and conflicts. I personally do not believe that in situations such as those, there is one person who is wrong and one person who is right. I personally believe that people's egos, people's unchecked shadow, people's wounding that they refuse to look at are bumping up against each other. It has nothing to do with one person being in the wrong and one person being in the right. It has everything to do with one or both people not being willing to look within. That is my personal belief. That is my experience from an individual perspective, from an interpersonal perspective, and from a professional perspective. That is just what I have experienced and what I have come to believe. You do not have to believe this, but I do encourage that regardless of if you believe this or not, if you can, look within your own subconscious and your own shadow. I think that it would be beneficial to most people, to yourself and to the people around you. Follow along for more content about the subconscious mind, about meditative states,